Hey guys. Unfortunately, I forgot to record my presentation yesterday, so I will record one right now. It's pales in comparison, but it's the best I can do. So, the paper. Whoopsies. Okay, so my topic was alcohol and crime. I sought to analyze the different negative impacts of alcohol abuse. I looked at papers that involved domestic violence, whether that be to a spouse or a child. I also looked at the effects of alcohol abuse on income growth and also with crime and also with youth suicide. Youth suicide is the only one where the only damage is damage to self, other ones involve other people. The main economic questions being asked are: is there a causal relationship between alcohol abuse and crime? And the second question is: does alcohol abuse reduce the productive capacity of the economy either directly or indirectly? Policy relevance. So tax policy, do we need to raise price of alcohol using taxes? Drug policy, do we need to control availability? Health policy, public health hazard just like smoking is really bad. And criminal law policy, where I'm wondering if we need harsher punishments. Do we need them? Should there be other law reforms? And for social support, do we need to give money or resources so that people will stop drinking so much and causing whatever damages they'd cause? The specific article I'll be talking about today is Love on the Rocks, Domestic Violence and Alcohol Abuse in Rural Mexico. It's by Manuela Angelucci. She's a professor at the University of Michigan. It was written in 2008, published in 2008 rather. Paper relevance. So I'm looking at how Oportunidades, which is a social support program that involves a transfer payment as well as educational resources to women and like kind of the family indirectly. And I'm wondering if what the effect on domestic violence, alcohol use, and drunken domestic violence is. So as I said, it involves social assistance. And it makes us wonder if we should be changing these domestic violence laws. As I have said earlier, alcohol is a public health hazard. We need to do something because people are being hurt and they shouldn't be being hurt. Simple. The data was obtained from two nationally representative uh, surveys from two Mexican governmental authorities. So it's a cross-sectional data from 1998, 6 months after the program had started, and it involves 506 rural villages. My God, 506 rural villages, and incorporates 12,700 households. Sorry, I have a problem saying rural. Jeez. Estimation methods. So it's a randomized control experiment. 330 out of 506 of the villages were treated. We used three different types of regression. The first is ordinary least squares, which is very common for everything we are doing in like third and fourth year. And then they also use two-stage linear. Oh God, I forgot what it stood for. Two-stage least squared and Heckman correction. So those involve the problem of the error terms covarying between the dependent and independent variable, and for Heckman correction, that's for mitigating the problem of non-random sampling, I believe. I don't really understand it. So if you look at the top right corner, we can talk about a very general form before the author decides to make regression equations. So VH is the demand for violence, and it's a utility function based on Y, S, and P, where Y is the household income, S is the status perceived by the man, and P is the price of violence. S status, in turn, is a function of the husband's share of income, which is YH over Y. YH is the husband's contribution to household income. So simply just what he contributes over the total amount of income for the house. And price, this is the one that was not enumerated in the study at all, but it's supposed to be the tolerance level that the community and the wife have of the man's violent behaviors. So that one wasn't measured. An important thing to note is that the demand for violence decreases with increasing wealth, but it also increases though when the status of the man is reduced by that increasing wealth. So it's kind of like they push in opposite directions. So you have to see which one overpowers which. And I'll talk about what happens when we have the small transfers and the large transfers and how that affects that in a very shortly. Okay. So the regression equation down there, um, whew, I guess that's the D is the rate of alcohol abuse, and V is the rate of domestic violence, and then the VI at the bottom, using like I think those are gammas, are like the combined equation where there's conditional probability of um, of the domestic violence given that the person's already abusing alcohol. Some of the important factors we'll be looking at are the household size, like how many kids there is, the spousal age and spousal age difference, the schooling dummies, um, and like natural disasters and some other things, but I probably won't be mentioning those in this presentation because they're very minor. Some background information. So it's a biweekly income transfer to women only. To receive it, it's conditional on school attendance if you have children, a health check for the adults and the children, which is kind of annual for adults, more than annual, doesn't say how frequently for children, and also for lactating and pregnant women. The average transfer size is roughly 220 pesos, which was about 20 US dollars at the time per month, and that contributes a 40% increase to spousal income. And it's a 13-fold increase to wife because they traditionally did not make any income or very much income. The minimum that you can get is 100 pesos, and that only occurs when you have no kids. So that's about 10 bucks. And the maximum is around $62 worth. The child scholarship increases depending on what grade you are in, and it starts at 70 and ends at 255 pesos. You can only get the scholarship if the kid is in grade 3 to 9 and he is under 18. So there is incentive to start failing once you get to grade 9 or like whenever you are at the limit because if you go past grade 9, you can no longer receive the transfer for that kid. We're also only looking at households that have both husbands and wives. So that means there's no single parent families and also no households where there's multiple families in that house. Another important cool thing to look at is that a lot of people are drinking. It's very common. It's really prevalent in rural Mexico. There's 34% of people drinking in the control, and 96% of them are male. 15% of those are aggressive. So if you do the math, it works out to about 5% rate of drunken domestic violence. Frequently, this occurs 32% of the time. Occasionally, 49%. Frequently is defined as more than once a week, and occasionally would be less than once a week. Now, it's also important that we define what a traditional husband is because that's what we're going to be talking about. So the first condition for being a traditional husband usually requires that like they want a higher income share or they have a higher income share because that's where they derive status from because traditionally the man was the breadwinner and you got to provide for your family and if your woman is taking away from that, that's a problem for you apparently. Number two, there's a large age gap. These men like to be older than their women. No idea why. I don't know. Youth is good. I don't know. Three, they're less educated. No explanation for that either. I would think maybe, like traditionally, you don't need an education. You're maybe in the field or just doing hands-on laborious work that doesn't need like that higher skilled education, I guess. Number four, you tend to have more children, which may tie into like three because like you might just need extra farm hands. There's no explanation in the study. I didn't do any background research on top of that, so I can't answer that one either. The main results. So regardless of your education level, there was a 15% drop in alcoholism. So that's just the alcohol abuse rates. Now, The effect of the program on aggressive behavior varies depending on the husband's education level. So for the treatment group, those that had high education were 1/3 less likely to be committing domestic violence. However, the low education, there was no change. So that means that they continued to beat their wives the same way. This means that domestic violence is not simply the side effect of alcohol abuse. And another important point is that the spousal income share for husbands dropped 35 percentage points from 97% to 62%. So, as I said earlier in that first equation, the females are contributing more to Y, which is the household income. However, they're at the same time decreasing the husband's income share, which is detrimental, at least in the case of the lowly educated man. There is a 1.6% decrease in violence when there's no eligible children for the entire group. And also, there seems to be a non significant 0% ish decrease when there's 1 to 3 kids. However, when you have 5 or more kids, it tends to have a positive effect. So, this is indicative of the more children condition of the traditional view that I had mentioned on the background information part. The age and age gap role is very minor. Where is that? Oh, when people are at the average ages, the husband and wife, so that'd be a husband at 42 and the wife at 38, there's only a 0.2% decrease in violence. And when there's a 10-year gap, it amounts to a 2%, 2% decrease in violence with a large transfer, but 10 years is very rare. The average is about 3 or 4 years. So it's kind of like an outlier, you could say. So the implications and conclusion. So, in conclusion, small transfers result in decreased violence in all households. So that's a given. Doesn't matter if you're lowly educated, highly educated. However, large transfers will have increased violence in more traditional households. So those are the ones where the dudes have lower education, more kids. They love that status. And finally, we can conclude that the problem lies in the antiquated and misogynistic traditional views of these husbands. Policy implications. There's a complete rejection of income pooling. So transferring to the household might be beneficial as opposed to the women specifically. This just means that the men are not happy that they're gaining more income, at least the low education, the traditional views. So, like, if you split it so that the man does not decrease status, which you could do if you transferred it to the household generally and not specifically to the woman, that would be beneficial. Another point to make, excuse me, is that because this status lost to the man happens to result in women being abused, we need more protective laws. We need to increase the price of violence, even. So we can bring down harsher punishments on these abusive men, and we can also educate women that that's not okay. Which ties into my last point of the need to progress away from traditional gender views. We need to be able to accept women into the workforce. We have to teach communities and wives and husbands that domestic violence is not okay. Doesn't matter if you're drunk or not. It's never okay. One of the internal strengths of the study was that it was able to isolate and identify some of the likely causes of domestic violence towards women. I would elaborate, but I already had. The second point is that it provides evidence indicating that income transfers affected a man for alcohol abuse, violence, and drunken violence, irrespective of alcohol price. So even with unchanging alcohol price, we see these things change with the income transfer and the other social support measures. Internal weakness. We talk about frequency, but not severity, which may be a problem. So frequency means that maybe the dude slaps his wife every night. or he does it once a week. Now, if you throw in severity, what if he's slapping his wife every night, but another dude, or hypothetically in another situation, the same dude is beating his wife once a week? Beating once a week may be worse than slapping every night. You know, you could argue that. There's also the underreporting and failure to participate problem of the women because they fear the negative repercussions that the men would perpetrate towards them. So, they're scared that if they contribute money, they're going to get beat up. And they therefore do not join in on this study in the program. Or they lie, which changes results as well. So, external strength. If we omit status, income growth relieves spousal tension, and this model can be used elsewhere. So, we can just talk about how if we are increasing the household income, and people like the husbands don't care about the status loss because they don't value that status loss, then this seems like a really good model. So say, for example, myself, I personally wouldn't care how much my wife made. If she made more money than me, if she made less money than me, it doesn't matter. Any contribution to income is helpful. And the second external strength is that this if we accept these traditional views and like use them elsewhere, like apply them elsewhere, it would explain the misogyny and subsequent violence towards women in other traditional countries. So that's Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, some other of those Middle Eastern countries. External weakness. So again, different countries are different. And the other countries, I'll talk about Canada specifically, that's very easy to relate to. We're very intolerant to domestic violence, rather. Sorry. There's a much higher price for it, which is a great deterrent. So Ontario specifically has a zero tolerance policy. So if you slap your wife once and she calls the cops, or the cops get involved even, you may get charged. So there is exceptions to the zero tolerance, but overall, yeah, you're gonna get charged. Again, this status issue does not apply everywhere. So I would say as the world develops, as the global community evolves and progresses towards equality, egalitarianism, like actually that's the same thing, I think. Either way, like towards, being more acceptant, the status issue won't apply. So increasingly, there's less places that dudes care about this income share. And lastly, the worst thing is the weak definition of domestic violence. For example, in Canada, we define domestic violence as not only physical abuse and sexual abuse, which are the two common definitions, but also emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse. There's not just those two touching abuses. Like these other abuses don't even involve the man touching her. And in some cases, that's even worse for the woman. And the problem is that these other factors for domestic violence are not accounted for in this study. And, maybe we'd find different results if they were, stronger results even. Does anyone have any questions? So this is the question period where people would ask questions. No one actually asked questions because the participation marks came in, so no one cared to ask questions, I guess. And I had the foresight to throw in my own questions just in case no one said anything. So I was wondering if, the zero tolerance policy was a good idea. It's pretty contentious because there's problems associated with it that discriminate against men. So if the woman cries woof, says the husband's doing something or the boyfriend's doing something, the cops are getting involved and the dude will probably get in trouble. So, excuse me. So, like, it really makes it so that couples who don't actually have a problem are, like, forced to not call the cops. So, like, even if you wanted to call the cops for anything, even, or the ambulance, like, you may end up inadvertently throwing your husband into jail and giving him a criminal record. Then the other question was, should we move towards punishing those who commit crimes rather than punishing the public as a whole. Like this is very hard because of the asymmetric information problem common in economics, where the buyers and sellers have differing information. You, as the consumer of alcohol, you know what you are capable and incapable of doing, and the government don't know. So like that's why the legal drinking age is so high, because as a whole we're irresponsible. However, there's countries out there where there's no drinking age. Looking at that list, apparently Norway, the best country in the world, has no drinking age. I actually didn't look into that, but I just glanced at that now. Yeah. So I'm sorry for stumbling everywhere. It's different because I'm reading off my phone instead of my speaker notes, but also I prepared for my presentation yesterday and I since forgot it. But yeah, thank you.